$315,000. That's a lot of money. And that was the number. A recent study came out and said that that's how much a person in retirement could expect to spend on medical expenses. That's the average spending on medical expenses, $315,000. That's a lot of money. And it is enough to certainly garner our attention. And a lot of clients that I work with that are about to retire, and even some that are in retirement, worry about medical expenses because we understand that medical expenses can end up racking up major amounts of money. And one of the main reasons why people go into bankruptcy is because of medical debt. And so we want to think about those medical expenses and think about the ramifications of them and how to plan for them appropriately. And so I have a few thoughts to share when it comes to medical expenses in retirement, and how can one afford to pay for medical expenses in retirement, and how can it pay for healthcare expenses in retirement. And so the first thing that I like to think about is 315,000. The study said that that was the average. But we also have to think about that's the lifetime of a person. So retirement might be mid 60s, and they may live into their 80s or 90s or longer, depending on their health. And so that $315,000 number needs to be taken into consideration from what does it look like on a yearly basis rather than a total number. The total number certainly garners your attention. Whoa, that's a lot of money. But when we think about 315,000 divided by a 20 or 30-year lifetime, it ends up being a little bit more palatable. And so I hope that gives you a little bit of assurance first to understand that that $315,000 number really should be broken up over the lifetime. And so when we think about planning though for healthcare expenses, it still could end up being $6, 10, 12, $15,000 a year, potentially, depending on lots of different situations. And so let's kind of talk through that. Right now, the first thing that I would say is a lot of the cost when it comes to medical expenses depends on when are you going to retire, or when is your retirement date. And the key number there is 65, because at 65 you're then eligible for Medicare. So are you going to retire before 65 or after 65? And if it's before, then that's a lot different calculations than after 65. So let's talk through retiring before 65. Retiring before 65 is great. Retire early, you're younger, healthier, hopefully, and being able to do things is great. But then we have to consider what are the healthcare costs associated with that retirement. And when it comes to that, retiring before 65 or retiring early, the healthcare costs are really going to be how you can go out into the general insurance marketplace and qualify for insurance. According to the Affordable Care Act, depending on your state as well, there are some different states have different plans, and there's lots of kind of nuanced rules with healthcare. But a lot of times you're looking at either the Affordable Care Act or continuing on some sort of employer coverage plan as well. When it comes to the Affordable Care Act, those costs can add up pretty quickly. The average cost is probably around $1,000 a month per person, give or take lots of different variables, of course. But those are real numbers that you could be looking at, maybe $10,000, $12,000 a year per person in healthcare costs before 65. Now, there are some ways to get around that, especially around your income. So one tip or tidbit is look at structuring your income where you might be able to qualify for some tax benefits when it comes to the Affordable Care Act and some subsidies for that. And so there's some programs available and some ways to structure your income to potentially mitigate some of those healthcare costs before 65. Now, post 65 retirement, healthcare costs or medical expenses are going to be really associated with Medicare. And so with Medicare, there's two ways you can go. You can go traditional Medicare, and that's where you have Part A and Part B, and then you start to fill in some different parts and components depending on the type of healthcare coverage that you want. Some people think Medicare covers everything. Medicare does not cover everything. So that's why they have these kind of additional parts of Medicare to be able to fill in based on the health coverage that you think you might need. Part A covers your general hospital visits and things of that nature. Part B is covering your doctor visits and things of that nature. And then there's other parts as well. So traditional Medicare is a little bit of a more of a piecemeal approach. There's also Advantage plans or supplemental plans, which basically you have Part A, and then the supplemental plan covers everything else. Generally, those are a little bit less expensive because they're a little bit more localized and they are subsidized by the government. But they're not an end-all be-all either. A lot of times there's some restrictions with traveling and things of that nature too, in-network, out-of-network. But nonetheless, Medicare, once you start a Medicare, that's generally less expensive than just your own personal policy or personal insurance before Medicare age. But the averages are still right now, at least in 2022, around $6,000 or so a year per person for Medicare-related expenses. That's going to be your prescriptions and doctor's visits and ongoing premiums, all of that stuff. And so that's an additional $6,000 a year that one might need to plan for in expenses when it comes to their healthcare expenses. And so it's really breaking up between pre-Medicare and post-Medicare age as far as those healthcare expenses go. So then how do you pay for that? How do you pay for those extras? Well, some companies offer employee healthcare benefits that go on, like Disney, for instance, at one point in time did offer healthcare coverage. They stopped that back in kind of the mid 90s. And so a lot of people that work for the company after that are not eligible for that healthcare benefit any longer. And so that may not be an option. I've even seen some clients take on a part-time job somewhere that offers benefits to part-time workers to be able to cover those healthcare expenses rather than having to come out of pocket. And the other way to really pay for it is just simply in using your savings, using your investments, and creating the income to be able to pay for those, and just adding that on top of what your monthly need is. And so that's really the other way to pay for it. Now, there are, depending on where you're at towards retirement, maybe you can save into vehicles like a health savings account that may be able to give you some tax benefits when it comes to healthcare costs as well. So those are some different ways. Now, one part of healthcare that's not included in that number is aging costs, and that's its whole old animal to talk about, and that's long-term care. Aging care, that's not included in that number because that could be hundreds of thousands of dollars a year, possibly, depending on what type of care one needs. So really, we're just talking about your average ongoing healthcare costs. But the nice thing is once you have that insurance and you have the plan, you know that you're going to only be liable for a certain out-of-pocket, and so it helps relieve some of the anxiety of potentially, this catastrophic health event that you would be on the hook for. Many times the health insurance plans, you're able to structure it where you have a maximum out of pocket so that even if, God forbid, something terrible happened, the insurance company is going to pick up most of those costs for you. And so we want to plan for that appropriately. An example of a client that I've worked with, he retired early mid 60s, about 63. And he's a single guy and wanted to retire, but was concerned about the healthcare costs. Now, he had done a good job saving. He had a good bit of cash on hand, had some stocks and mutual funds and a retirement account. And so we were able to look at his assets and realize that we could generate income to cover him until he turned 65 that would then qualify him for some Affordable Care Act benefits. So his health insurance cost was going to go from $800 a month, it went down to like $60 a month because of how we were able to structure his income and the nuances of his situation. And so if you're concerned about healthcare costs and you're concerned about healthcare costs in retirement and medical costs in retirement and what is that going to look like, I'd be happy to chat with you. We can always set up a time to talk over Zoom or in person if you're in the Central Florida area. My name is Kyle Newell, and I'm a fee-only financial advisor. My office is in Winter Garden, Florida, but I serve the greater Orlando, Central Florida area in person and virtually. And of course, I can serve clients all over the country virtually as well. And so if you do have any questions about this or any other comments, feel free to drop me a comment, send me a message, shoot me a text, or give me a call, email, or what have you. My website is newellwm.com, so NEWELL.WM.com. So it stands for Newell Wealth Management. So NewellWM.com. And I hope you have a wonderful day, and I hope to see you real soon. Take care.